Do you have any idea who I am?
Do you have any
Yes,
idea
ma'am,
who I am?
do, and I still think you're wrong. The crystal glass in Grace Kin's hand slipped from her
Yes, ma'am,
fingers.
I do.
It hit the marble floor and
And I still
shattered
think
into
you're wrong.
100 pieces. Every conversation in that ballroom stopped at once. Waiters froze mid-step. Guests turned. Somewhere near the string quartet, the music faltered and died. Nobody spoke to Grace Kim like that. Not the guests, not the guards, not even her own husband. But Maya wasn't thinking about Grace's name that night. She was thinking about her little brother lying in a hospital bed 3 miles away and the insurance card in her pocket that only worked as long as she kept this job. What happened next would end one woman's reign of fear and almost cost another woman everything she had left. Before we go further, if you believe the quietest person in a room can still be the strongest one in it, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, because this story is about to get a lot harder before it gets better. To understand how Maya Bennett ended up standing in front of the most feared woman in that mansion, we have to go back 3 months. Maya was 26 years old, and she had learned a long time ago that life didn't hand out second chances easily. She had raised her younger brother Malik since she was 20 after their mother passed. Malik was 17 now, and he was sick. Not the kind of sick that gets better with rest. The kind that needed dialysis 3 times a week and medication that cost more than Maya made in a month at her old job. She had been turned down twice before for positions that came with real insurance. The Kim household was her 3rd try. She remembered sitting in the hallway outside the interview room, hands folded tightly in her lap, whispering to herself, "Please, just this one. I'll do anything. Just let this be the one." It was. The job came with full medical coverage, effective after 30 days. Malik had 26 days of treatment left on his current plan when Maya was hired. The math was simple, and it was terrifying. If she lost this job before her coverage started, there would be a gap. And a gap for someone like Malik was not just inconvenient, it could be dangerous. Maya told herself she only needed to survive 1 month. Keep her head down, do her job well, stay invisible. On her first morning, an older housekeeper named Rosa pulled her aside near the laundry room. "Listen to me. Whatever you do, do not let Mrs. Kim catch your eye. Don't speak unless she speaks first. Don't explain yourself if she's upset. Just apologize and walk away." Even if I didn't do anything wrong? Especially then. I've been in this house 11 years, sweetheart. I've seen maids leave crying. I've seen a driver fired because her perfume gave Mrs. Kim a headache. There is no version of being right in this house. There is only staying or leaving. Maya nodded and said nothing. But something in her chest tightened. She had promised herself, after what happened at her previous job, that she would never again watch someone get blamed for something they didn't do and stay silent about it. At her previous position, a co-worker named Denise had been fired over a missing shipment that Maya knew for a fact Denise hadn't touched. Maya had said nothing. She told herself it wasn't her place to. She told herself she needed the paycheck too badly to risk it. She had regretted it every day since. So she made herself a quiet promise, walking into the Kim estate that first morning. Never again, even if it costs me. She didn't know yet how literally that promise would be tested. The Kim estate was less a home and more a fortress dressed up as luxury. Daniel Kim, the head of one of the most powerful family organizations on the East Coast, was rarely seen without at least 2 men trailing a respectful distance behind him. But inside those walls, he was oddly gentle. Maya noticed it within her first week. He said good morning to the staff. He remembered names. Once she saw him quietly slip an envelope of cash to a groundskeeper whose wife was expecting a baby and ask him not to mention it to anyone. Grace Kim was different. Grace moved through the house like she was inspecting it for flaws that personally offended her. She corrected the placement of flowers. She sent food back that looked, to Maya, entirely perfect. She had a way of speaking to staff that made them shrink, not through volume, but through a kind of icy, bored disappointment, as though every person in that house was a slight inconvenience she was too gracious to complain about loudly. "This is unacceptable. I don't expect much. I expect competence." Maya watched a housemaid apologize for a wrinkle in a tablecloth that Maya genuinely could not see. It didn't take long for Maya to notice a pattern. Grace's cruelty seemed to spike right after certain visits. Whenever Daniel's mother, an elegant, sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Kim Sr., came to the estate, Grace would be unusually tense for days afterward. Once, Maya was polishing silver in the hallway when she overheard a fragment of conversation she wasn't meant to hear. Mrs. Kim Sr., cutting, quiet. "You are not the only woman who could have stood beside my son, Grace. Do not forget that." There was a long pause. Then Grace's voice, tight, controlled, almost pleading. "I have given this family everything. Then act like it." Maya slipped away before either woman noticed her, but she carried that exchange with her for days. It didn't excuse what came next, but it explained it a little. Grace wasn't cruel because she was powerful. Grace was cruel because, underneath the jewelry and the perfectly tailored dresses, she was terrified of being seen as replaceable. That didn't make her safe to be around. If anything, it made her more dangerous, because people who are afraid of losing control tend to grip everything around them a little too tightly. 3 weeks into Maya's employment, the incident that changed everything. A young houseboy named Tobias, barely 19, was carrying a tray of empty champagne glasses through the east hallway when he brushed against a side table. Nothing fell, nothing broke, but the movement caught Grace's eye from across the room, and she seized on it like a spark finding dry grass. "Do you have any idea what that table is worth? Do you understand what would happen if you broke it?" Tobias, stammering, "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Kim, I didn't mean, do you I don't want to hear excuses. Pack your things, you're done here." The boy's eyes filled with tears immediately. Every staff member nearby lowered their heads, the way Rosa had taught Maya to do. Stay invisible, let it pass, don't be next. Maya felt her promise to herself rise up in her chest like something physical. "Mrs. Kim, he didn't break anything. Nothing was damaged." The room went quiet in a different way now. Grace turned, slowly, and looked at Maya as though noticing an insect on her sleeve. "I'm sorry. Did I ask for your opinion?" "No, ma'am, but it isn't fair to fire him over something that didn't happen." "Fair? You think this is about fair? Do you know how replaceable you are? Do you know how many girls would take your position in an hour? Probably a lot. But that doesn't make him deserve to lose his job for nothing." Grace's face went through something complicated then, somewhere between fury and disbelief. Nobody spoke to her like that. Not in 3 years of marriage into this family, not once. "Fine. If you'd like to defend him so badly, you can both pack your things. Please, let him keep his job. I'll take responsibility for interrupting you. I'll go if someone has to." There was a long, terrible silence. Then Daniel Kim's voice from the doorway, quiet but firm. "No one is losing their job over a tray of empty glasses." Grace turned, and for a flicker of a second, something like fear crossed her face before her composure returned. "Daniel, I was simply enforcing standards. Someone has to. There are standards, and there's cruelty. Let's not confuse the two in front of our staff." He didn't look at Maya, not yet, but Tobias kept his job that day, and word moved through the staff quarters like electricity. Someone had finally stood up to Grace and survived it. A quiet laugh, not from relief, but disbelief. Rosa found Maya later that evening, hands still trembling slightly from adrenaline. "Girl, do you know what you just did?" "I know. I probably shouldn't have." "No, you probably shouldn't have. but I haven't seen anyone do that in 11 years. That night, Maya sat by Malik's hospital bed, holding his hand while he slept, and wondered if she had made a mistake that would cost them everything. The coverage hadn't kicked in yet. She still had 9 days left before her insurance activated. 9 days where one wrong move could end it all. Malik stirred slightly, half awake, and squeezed her fingers. "You look like you had a rough day," forcing a smile. "You have no idea," teasing softly. "Did you finally tell someone off?" Laughing quietly, despite herself. "Maybe, a little."
Good. You always let people walk over you with the old job. I hated watching that. Maya sat with that for a moment. Her 17-year-old brother, hooked to a machine that kept his blood clean because his kidneys couldn't do it themselves anymore, was the one reminding her not to shrink. She kissed his forehead and told him to rest, and on the drive back to the estate that night, alone in the dark, she allowed herself to feel something other than fear for the first time in weeks, something closer to resolve. She didn't know Grace was already planning her next move. Twist 1 arrived 4 days later. Maya was summoned to Daniel's study, expecting praise, or at least a quiet acknowledgement. Instead, she found Daniel's expression unreadable, and Grace standing beside his desk, arms folded, composed once more. "Maya, Grace tells me you've been undermining her authority with the staff, encouraging them to disregard her instructions." Maya felt the floor tilt slightly beneath her. "That's not what happened, sir." "I have 3 staff members willing to confirm it, Daniel. I'm not inventing this." Daniel looked at Maya for a long moment, and something in his face told her everything. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of trust, even if it had grown complicated. Against that, a maid he had known for 3 weeks. Daniel didn't say the words, but he didn't say Grace was lying either. "I need you to understand something, Maya. I appreciate what you did for Tobias. I do. But I can't run this house on accusations against my wife without proof." Maya answered, steady despite the fear rising in her. "I understand, sir." She left that study with her stomach in knots, and for the first time since she'd made her promise, she wondered if she'd been foolish to keep it.
That night, Rosa found her crying quietly in the linen closet and sat down beside her without a word for a long moment. Rosa gently said, "You did the right thing, you know, even if it doesn't feel like it." Maya, voice breaking slightly, "Doing the right thing doesn't pay for dialysis, Rosa." Rosa didn't have an answer for that. Nobody did. Twist 2 came from a place Maya never expected. A young kitchen assistant named Priya, the same girl who had quietly thanked Maya weeks earlier for standing up for Tobias, had been the one to tell Grace that Maya had been talking about her. It wasn't malice, it was fear. Grace had cornered Priya in the pantry, hinting that her immigration sponsorship could become complicated if she wasn't more cooperative. Priya found Maya later, ashamed, unable to meet her eyes. Priya, whispering, guilt-stricken, "I'm so sorry. She said things about my papers. I panicked." Maya exhales slowly, not angry, just tired. "I understand, Priya. I do. Fear makes people do things they don't want to do." She meant it. She thought of Denise back at her old job and how easily silence could be forgiven, even when it hurt someone else. She wasn't going to be the person who punished someone else for being afraid. She had been that person once, from the other side. But it meant Maya was now isolated. Grace knew she was a threat, and threats in that house did not last long. Twist 3 came fast, and it came for blood.
A diamond bracelet, one that Grace wore often, went missing from her dressing room. Within hours, Grace announced in front of Daniel and two of his senior associates that she had seen Maya near her chambers that morning. I don't want to believe it, I really don't, but she was the only one in that hallway. I was delivering fresh linens. I was never inside her room. Grace, soft, devastating. Security cameras don't lie, Daniel. There were, in fact, no functioning cameras in that wing. Grace knew that. She was counting on nobody checking. Daniel's face was stone. Daniel, low, exhausted. Maya, I need you to hand over your belongings for inspection. It was in that moment that the letters Maya had discovered 3 weeks earlier talked behind a false panel in the study while dusting. Letters addressed to Daniel from his mother. Letters Grace had been intercepting and destroying for over a year. Letters that would have proven Grace's manipulation long before any bracelet went missing. Disappeared from the drawer where Maya had hidden them for safekeeping. She went to retrieve them that same night, planning to finally bring them to Daniel directly. The drawer was empty. This was Maya's false defeat. Her evidence was gone. She was accused of theft she didn't commit. Her ally in the kitchen had been frightened to silence. Her insurance activation was still 5 days away, and the one person who might have believed her was beginning to doubt everything about her. She sat on the edge of her narrow staff room bed that night, suitcase half packed, and allowed herself, for the first time since arriving at that house, to cry without holding back. I'm sorry, Malik. I tried. She had decided by morning that she would leave quietly, not because she had done anything wrong, but because staying meant a fight she no longer had the evidence to win, and she couldn't risk what little time remained before losing coverage entirely. She was wrong about one thing: she wasn't as alone as she believed. The reversal came from the person nobody expected. Mrs. Kim Sr., Daniel's mother, had been quietly watching this unfold from the moment she heard rumors of a maid who had stood up to Grace over a houseboy. She had seen this pattern before, years earlier, with a woman who worked for the family before Grace, a woman who had also been isolated, accused, and driven out under mysterious circumstances after getting too close to the truth about certain relationships within the household. Mrs. Kim Sr. arrived unannounced the next morning and asked, calmly, direct in a way only she could manage, why she had stopped receiving letters back from Daniel over 1.5 years ago. I wrote to my son every month for 1 year, Grace. He never once wrote back. Can you explain that to me?
Grace, faltering for the first time. I don't know what you mean. Perhaps the post. Mrs. Kim Sr. cutting through gently but firmly. Grace, I raised that boy. He does not ignore his mother. Something happened to those letters. It was in that conversation that Daniel, standing quietly in the doorway, finally spoke the question he had apparently been circling for weeks without realizing it. Daniel, quiet, wounded. My mother wrote to me. For years. And you told me she never did. Grace, voice breaking. I did it to protect this family. A long pause. That was the moment the fear finally cracked. Not with shouting, not with scandal, with one exhausted man finally asking the question he should have asked years earlier. Daniel had, unknown to almost everyone, spent the past few days quietly reviewing the household's phone records and mail logs after noticing small inconsistencies himself, a missing envelope here, a rerouted call there. He wasn't a passive man. He simply hadn't wanted to believe what the pattern was showing him. His mother's arrival was the final piece. He turned to Grace, and his voice, when it came, was quieter than anyone expected. Every month, for over 1 year, you let me believe my mother had stopped caring. You let me believe I had lost her.
Why? Grace's carefully composed exterior finally gave way completely. Grace now crying, no longer performing. Because when she visits, she reminds you there was a life before me, a better woman who could have stood where I stand. I was afraid if you two grew close again, you wouldn't need me anymore. Pause. Nobody in that room celebrated. Nobody shouted in triumph. There was only a heavy, uncomfortable silence, the sound of a lie finally running out of places to hide. It was Mrs. Kim Sr. who found Maya's missing letters that same evening, discovered discarded, half-burned in a decorative fireplace in Grace's private study that was rarely used. Enough remained to confirm everything: the dates, the handwriting, the pattern of a woman who had spent over a year quietly stealing a son from his mother out of fear of being forgotten herself. Daniel came to find Maya personally that night in the small staff quarters where she was, still, technically, half-packed to leave. Daniel, quiet, humbled. "I owe you an apology I don't know how to give properly." Maya, exhausted, careful. "You don't owe me anything, sir. You believed the person you'd trusted for 15 years. I understand that." Daniel, shaking his head slowly. "No. I let fear run this house for years, and I told myself it was just Grace being particular. I ignored what it was doing to everyone under this roof, including, apparently, my own relationship with my mother. You saw it in 3 weeks. I didn't see it in 3 years." Short pause. "Daniel, gently. Your job is secure, Maya. More than secure. I'd like you to take on a new role here, overseeing staff welfare directly, answering only to me. Someone in this house needs to make sure something like this never happens again. I think it should be you." Maya was quiet for a long moment, thinking of Malik, of the insurance card in her pocket that would now never lapse, of Rosa's warning on her very first day, of Denise from years ago, whose firing she never spoke up against. "I just didn't want to be the person who stayed silent again. That's exactly why it should be you." The weeks that followed brought a different kind of quiet to the Kim estate. Not the fearful, careful silence of before, but something gentler. Staff spoke more freely. Rosa laughed, actually laughed, in the hallway one afternoon, something Maya realized she had never once heard in her first month there. Tobias kept his job and eventually became one of Daniel's most trusted assistants. Priya's sponsorship concerns were quietly and permanently resolved, without conditions attached. Malik's treatment continued without interruption. Maya was there for every appointment after that, and for the first time in years she wasn't doing the math in her head during them, calculating how many days of coverage remained, wondering what would happen if the money ran out. Months later, a new employee joined the household staff, nervous on her first day, unsure of the rules, glancing around at a house she'd heard rumors about. Maya found her in the hallway and did something Rosa had never done for her. "Hey, first day nerves? Is it true what they say about this house, that people used to be afraid here? Used to be, not anymore, not if I have anything to do with it." And in the end, that's the part of the story people remember most. Not the shattered glass, not the accusations or the missing bracelet, or even the letters burned in secret. What people remember is that fear can run a house for years, convincing everyone it's simply the way things are. And it only takes one person willing to risk everything they have to prove it never had to be that way at all. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about choosing honesty even when you have the most to lose, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe, because there are more stories like Maya's still to come. Tell us in the comments, if you were standing in Maya's place that night with everything on the line, what would you have done?